For decades, the truth of systemic racism has been swept under the rug. In America, a reckoning is overdue. Recent racist incidents demand direct language. The hard truth must be said. America stands at the crossroads. The choice is clear. Do we have the will and determination to finally rise above 401 years of bigotry and racism? As our young emerging leaders remind us, our inaction and intolerance are literally choking the promise of freedom, the essential essence that launched and guided us throughout our history. The current crisis around policing and the protests in the streets confront us with the ugliness of who we are as a nation. At the Greater Phoenix Urban League, we will continue in the fight to make equality for all a reality and not a saying. This is the first in a series of monthly town halls that we will be conducting to keep you informed and aware of what must be done to make America great for all. A special thank go out to our panelists this evening, Congressman Greg Stanton, City of Phoenix Police Chief Jared Williams, and Pastor Warren Stewart Sr. of the First Institutional Baptist Church, and Kate Lynn Harris Lang, our young professional and an emerging young leader. We also extend sincere thanks to State Farm Insurance for their sponsorship of this event. Thanks to all of you that are participating and are watching this event. And remember to fill out the census. The state stands to lose $887 in federal funding for every Arizonan who does not respond to the census. And the money for the census count pays for everything from buses to highways, Head Start programs, and special education, housing, and wildfire prevention. And finally,
this is the first installment of a monthly series that will give citizens from Phoenix and surrounding cities a chance to connect directly with various community, civic, and business leaders. We wanted to create a platform that would allow you to connect directly with those individuals influencing and making decisions that will impact our lives. This will include everyone from elected officials to organizers to business owners. Today's topic is racial justice and police reform. As such, we have gathered some prominent figures who can speak to the topic. Without any further ado, let's meet our guests. So I'll start by introducing Chief Williams. Chief Williams is the Chief of Police for the City of Phoenix Police Department. Chief Williams, would you like to share a couple of words?
So good evening to everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to begin the process of talking through what policing can look like moving forward. I am definitely esteemed and honored to be with the panel of guests that we have, and thank you for the opportunity to walk through this process together. Thank you.
Next, we have Congressman Greg Stanton. Greg represents the 9th Arizona District of Arizona in the U.S. House of Representatives. Greg? I'm sorry, Greg, you're on mute, Greg. We got you.
Thank you so much, Gary. Thanks for putting this together and your leadership with the young professionals at the Phoenix Urban League. That organization is a powerhouse and growing and doing great things. Thanks to State Farm for helping to put this together. There really is no more important issue that our country is dealing with right now than the issue of racial justice and reforming policing in America to make it safer for everyone involved. And in Congress, we've taken some very important steps. We're going to go over those steps. I know a lot tonight, but I want to make sure everyone hears me clearly. I and we are listening. Change is coming. Change is essential. And the people that have been peacefully protesting on the streets of Phoenix and throughout the country, the message is being heard loud and clear. that if we're really going to improve justice in America, we have to do some serious reforming. It makes our country stronger. So I'm looking forward to a good forum here tonight.
Thank you, Congressman Stanton. Next, we have Pastor Warren H. Stewart of First Institutional Baptist Church.
Greetings and blessings. It's great to be on this panel. Thank you, Mr. Dean and Greater Phoenix Urban League for putting this together. We're looking forward to having a lively conversation that will produce some action steps before it's all said and done. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. And finally, we have our Civic Engagement Chair for the Greater Phoenix Urban League Young Professionals, Ms. Caitlin Harris-Lane.
Hi, glad to be here with the Urban League Young Professionals. We are a forum and a space for young professionals aged 21 to 40 to get engaged and help shape and create Phoenix into the place that they want to spend their time and the next decades from. So looking forward to this conversation and future actionable steps.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. Just for those in the audience, we have a list of prepared questions that either came in from the Greater Phoenix Urban League or were submitted prior to today's event. If you have a question that you would like to ask, you'll have an opportunity to do so towards the later part of our event. All you need to do is drop it within the chat, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. We'll have the opportunity to answer those questions later in the day. We'll get started with the prepared questions, and I actually want to start with Chair Caitlin Harris-Lane. We have seen many people, particularly young adults, become activated in recent weeks to voice their opinions. From your perspective, how successful have the efforts been, and how would you gauge the response from our law enforcement agencies and elected officials?
So we've had a lot of losses, but I'd say recently we have had some wins. I remember I've been in this seat for about 18 months now. Soon after we took over as a new board, we attended the community meeting between the Phoenix PD and Mayor Gallego at Pilgrim Rest. It was just about a year ago, a couple of weeks ago. We had thousands of community members there who really wanted to see more productive relationships moving forward with Phoenix PD. There were families who were grieving and didn't have answers. So a year ago to now come today to the Phoenix City Council passing the Civilian Review Board and allocating $3 million in funding, that is a big step, and it wasn't easy. I'd say as far as the response from law enforcement, I think the community is still concerned about the approach to protests with riot gear, the number of arrests, especially in some of the early days of the protests, and record numbers of police shootings. And we've had some recently that people are greatly concerned about.
Thank you, Caitlin. We'll now pivot to Chief Williams.
Just make sure that I unmute myself. So to the point of the Civilian Review Board, the community has been asking for that for a number of years. I think Pastor Stewart can definitely speak to that. We see that as a win also in that, and I've said at the table numerous times, that to have an outside entity look into our agency will serve to do a couple of different things. So one, obviously increase transparency. Two, increase some of the trust that folks have in law enforcement. And I've never been shy about saying out loud that there are people who just plain don't trust the police, and there should be some entity and some outlook or a way for them to express their concerns, because there's just this innate trust that some folks have in law enforcement. To speak to the reforms and to Congressman Stanton's point, we are listening. Some of the challenges for us will be taking a system and pivoting it on a dime and on a circle. And it's not to say that that can't happen, but some of the things that I'm dealing with as a police chief are things that are written into laws and into policies. So if individuals want to see changes in that, we can help go through the process of changing, but some of the laws and the rules and the regulations are going to have to change in order for us to make some of the reforms that the community members are asking for. I can say this, Phoenix PD has always been good about adjusting and changing with the times, and this is a time such as this. So we've rolled out body-worn cameras. We've started our critical incident video review. I too would like to see a decrease in shootings. So I'm not going to specifically talk about this last one because it's still under an active and open investigation. But at the same time, too, that there are individuals out in the community who are doing bad things to people. And so we are going to have to work our way through that process. I always welcome suggestions of especially our young folks who are coming up with some great solutions. One of the solutions came from a young man, his last name is Nunez, came up with the idea of having an outside entity investigate police shootings. It doesn't necessarily have to be the law enforcement agency, but we have to figure out what that system is going to look like so that all voices will be heard and the investigation can be completed. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief Williams. I actually wanted to pivot off one of the questions and ask the question to Representative Stanton.
Same question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost track of where I was. So, as mentioned, the City of Phoenix recently established the Civilian Oversight Board to review cases of police shootings and claims of misconduct. I will ask you, when talking to your colleagues in Congress, how beneficial have they been in improving the manner in which Black and Brown communities have been dealt with it? And in addition to that, is there any reason to believe it would improve the condition as many are expecting?
Well, I think an additional set of eyes and ears, working with the police department, working with the community, doing it separate investigations so that when the chief has to make a very difficult decision, when a police officer hasn't been involved in a shooting, when the chief has to make a decision about discipline or potential termination, I think Chief Williams, who I work very closely with, we're lucky enough to hire her during my time as mayor in the city of Phoenix. I think that's going to be a positive. Are they really taking their responsibility to do independent investigations as seriously as they should? So I don't think there's any one answer to this incredibly important that we're dealing with. The situation to make the lives of African American and Latino citizens as they interact with the police, to make that interaction as safe as possible. There's not one solution. So I think in Phoenix, the civilian advisory, the civilian board is a good step in terms of additional set of eyes, but there's no substitution for hiring a really good police chief, like we're lucky enough to have in the city of Phoenix, and letting that police chief, him or her, make the tough choices and then supporting that chief as they make those tough choices. We did it together, Chief Williams and I and the council, when we put in our budget body cams for every officer on the street. We did that before it was a common thing to do for departments around the country. Having that transparency and accountability of body cams is probably the most important thing we can do to increase trust in the community. Again, that's not the total solution, but that's a huge step in the right direction. And we did a lot of other important reforms in terms of better supporting our immigrant community as they interact with our police department, better supporting people who have various sorts of mental illness and the challenges there. The chief helped put together a division of the police department where officers were better trained to help people with mental illness, whereas before it was a real challenge. We had some really, really difficult cases, including the tragic death of Michelle Cusseau. And so there are a lot. I think doing community boards like the one we're talking about is one step among many that we can better serve the community.
Thank you, Representative Stan. So if I can pivot to Pastor Stewart, if you want to direct a question, but in addition to that, I would ask if you have any thoughts or suggestions on what components would be needed for a civilian review board to operate at its most usefulness.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As the chief mentioned, we have been fighting for the Civilian Review Board for well over 20 years because as the community cannot police itself, the police cannot police themselves when they may have made a mistake or done something wrong or broken the law or the policy. So it's not a matter of distrust, it's a matter of logic, a matter of being rational and being independent. And the African American Christian Clergy Coalition in the Valley of the Sun was very instrumental in working with the chief, working with the city council and the mayor, working with community leaders, and in pushing, saying that this is the time for Phoenix to join the other major cities in the nation and have an independent civilian review board. And remember, this was before George Floyd's public murder, but it also was right after that tragic incident where the police officers abused the young couple and their babies over a stop. And so as the George Floyd incident has brought national reckoning, as Mr. Dean has said, that incident, even though there had been many incidents in Phoenix, but that incident that was caught on video showed an ugly side of when police go wrong. And that was really an impetus for the community to come together in that huge meeting we had at Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church that Caitlin mentioned. And thousands of people were there and they heard us, and we're glad to be a part of the solution.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. Just as a follow-up, like, are there any specific components or elements that you believe would need to be included in order for it to operate effectively, a civilian oversight board? Well,
for one, it needs to be financed. It needs to be budgeted. And we thank God that a few weeks ago, even amidst the downturn in sales taxes, that the city council overwhelmingly voted to fully fund the civilian review board. This is not a volunteer board. It will have staff. It will have, I believe, an executive director, professionals, and it will involve, of course, the community and the police. But this is a major policy making board in the city of Phoenix.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. I wanted to pivot back over to Chief Williams, and there is an obvious divide in perception and reality between police officers around the country, the citizens, and those respective communities. What steps are being taken to synchronize these two viewpoints?
So I would love for it to just be one converging set, but I'm also not naive enough to think that that's happening. And I've been on a couple of different conference calls and you name it. But at the end of the day, the country has to face, or policing has to face, the fact that time after time after time, there are images of African-American males suffering at the hands of law enforcement. So we do need to own that piece and own that component. At the same time, it's incumbent upon leaders such as myself who run police departments to properly enculturate our people, to change and adjust policies and procedures and practices to mitigate some of the things that are happening. And to Pastor Stewart's point, we definitely came to light, not in the best way, in a horrible way possible, last year during the incident that he did reference. But at the same time, we learned from that incident and we changed and we adjusted. So we talked about body-worn cameras, we updated training, we implemented implicit bias training. We now have a process that when we have an officer-involved shooting, we go back out to that neighborhood and re-engage that neighborhood to let folks know what's going on. So I don't want it to be lost on the fact that we didn't do anything from last year's lessons learned. But I will say that we do have a ways to go, and those ways to go are through policies, procedures, practices, and holding officers accountable. Phoenix PD has been that law enforcement agency too that is holding officers accountable. While the great part of my job is being able to promote people and hire people, I also have the responsibility of making sure that people whom I don't believe after an investigation is happening shouldn't be police officers, that they are not police officers too. So I think it takes that urgency to make sure that we communicate that. Can we get better? Yes. Can we communicate more? Yes. Can we be faster about getting things done while still being accurate? We're working through that process.
Right. So for any of the civilians that are on our panel, so Pastor Stewart or Caitlin, is there any sort of elements, ideas, initiatives that you would like to see implemented to help synchronize the different viewpoints between police officers and civilians?
I defer to Caitlin.
So from my knowledge, so I referenced back to that meeting a year ago. I think what would have been great at that meeting is to have, already the dates or a more regular cadence already set to have an opportunity for people to address Chief Williams and share concerns. I feel that a lot of community members probably don't feel like they have a line of communication to the police outside of calling the number. So I think that would be a step in the right direction. And I would say, yeah, I'd stop there.
So just a quick point to everyone in the audience. We see a few questions coming in. If you are interested in getting your question answered, I would ask you to hold on to them till a bit later in the program. As of now, it's like nearly impossible to catch it, but we'll have opportunity to address questions from the audience. So I actually had a question for Representative Stanton in regards to legislation that I know that you have been working on. You are a co-sponsor of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2020. For those listening who are not familiar, will you please share what's included in this bill along with its status?
Okay, thanks for asking. I am a co-sponsor of that bill, but the real power behind that bill is Congresswoman Karen Bass from California, who I serve with on the Judiciary Committee, and she is chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. And I think it was the Congressional Black Caucus that really provided the leadership and pushed the full caucus to pass a bill that would make real and significant changes to accountability and transparency in policing across the United States of America. Frankly, they pushed us outside, a lot of members outside of their comfort zone to do the right thing. But after listening to George Floyd's brother, who did testify before the Judiciary Committee, after listening to civil rights leaders, after listening to law enforcement leaders, I felt that this bill was the right direction for the United States of America. And it's a bill that is a much stronger bill than what the Senate has proposed, a significantly stronger proposal than the executive order that President Trump tried to put forward. Let me just give a couple examples of what's in the bill that not only I'm co-sponsoring, but the bill that has passed the United States Congress. So this bill is the United States Congress bill to fight for more just policing in America. We're waiting on Senate action. It would, number one, ban chokeholds for police officers across the country. It would ban no-knock warrants in drug cases. The tragic murder of Breonna Taylor in Louisville was a result of a no-knock warrant. We've looked at the facts of that case and other cases and said, you know what? The value of no-knock warrants is not worth the risk of life. And so that is included in the bill. It would end qualified immunity for police officers. Frankly, that's probably the most controversial part of the bill. But if a police officer does violate a citizen's civil rights, they ought to be held accountable just like anyone else would be held accountable for the same thing. It doesn't establish a national police misconduct registry so that it'll have to be reported to the federal government and have to be made available for public viewing. Officers that have been involved in disciplinary issues or have been involved in police violence of various sorts. So the community is well aware of those officers. Let's say Chief Williams decides to terminate an officer, and that decision to terminate is upheld by the Civil Service Board. We don't want that officer being able to move to a different jurisdiction without the community being aware. There's a lot more detail to the bill, but those are the strongest points of the bill. And I urge the Senate to take quick action on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act.
So the question I have to Congressman Stanton is, in reality, since there's a difference between what has been passed by the democratically controlled House of Representatives, what can be done for a compromise to get the Senate to pass a similar bill? Is that a reality, or are we just going through the motions and we have to wait until the election is over in November?
Okay, Pastor Stewart, bipartisanship does exist in the United States Congress on occasion. We've passed 4 COVID-related bills in a bipartisan way, including the CARES Act that did provide PPP to businesses all across America. We read about those businesses today because they finally did release the names of all the businesses that benefited from it. It's the money that came that Governor Ducey has spent to provide support for small cities across the state, et cetera. 4 bills we've passed to support the country on COVID. We do have another bill in the House that the Senate hasn't passed, but we have come together at least on that. We did come together on the USMCA, which is the trade agreement with Mexico and Canada. So yes, it's a partisan body, no doubt about it, but we can come together on occasion. And I do believe that Senator Tim Scott, who's the lead in the Senate on the bill, which I believe the bill is too weak in the Senate. Obviously, I voted for the George Floyd bill. Karen Bass, who's a professional, a consummate professional, I do believe that they are engaging in talks right now to see if they can reach a compromise. But we're not going to reach compromise if the bill is too watered down and doesn't do some of those basic things that I described, like banning chokeholds, like banning no-knock warrants, and has to have some reform of qualified immunity. Right now, the Senate bill has none of those things. And in order to reach compromise, the Senate's going to really have to stretch a little bit, and we're going to have to have a willingness to compromise as well. And I'm certainly one of the members of Congress that has shown an ability to reach across the aisle and reach compromise.
Congressman Stan, to a follow-up to that question, is there anything that us, the voters, can do at this very moment to help push that bill along in Senate, or to get our local representative, our senators, to take action and help support the bill?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, what we saw with the peaceful demonstrations here in Phoenix, which is ongoing, across the United States, which is ongoing, has had a definite impact. I think that really gave power to the Congressional Black Caucus, and they then really turned to the full caucus and said, we need to do this right. Let's do a bill that we can really be proud of and really will make a significant difference in police accountability and transparency. If people watching this do believe that the approach that I described with the House bill is the right thing, then that bill has to get a hearing in the Senate. They're going to have to really communicate with their senator. Now, Pastor Stewart's right. They're not going to take our bill in whole and pass exactly what we passed, but we want to make sure in any compromise that occurs, the bill looks a lot closer to what the House passed than I believe the much too watered down version that is currently being proposed in the United States Senate. This is a moment in time. This is one of the most important civil rights bills that we have passed in Congress in a long period of time. And the issue is so important that it does deserve more of a hearing than in the Senate than it's currently gotten.
Thank you, Congressman Stan. And you bring up a great point of community members becoming activated, out protesting and helping to empower the local representatives. I wanted to segue to Caitlin. I think we all can identify there's been a great number of millennials and zillennials out there, Generation Z, that have become activated and whatnot. I just wanted to hear a bit from Caitlin, our resident young professional on the panel, to kind of talk about your perspective on how effective and how important it's been for the young adults to get out and have their voices heard.
I think it's been critical. I think people are protesting who haven't protested before, and once you start, it's hard to stop. I think with this latest push in Phoenix, not only were there more people protesting, but there were more groups coming together and forming coalitions to get things done, keep people informed, and even outside of our young professional groups like Black Lives Matter, Phoenix Metro, Mass Lib AZ, Voter in Action, Transport Pueblo, Phoenix Local Organizing Committee. All those groups were co-branding materials and events to bring more people out and bring people together to really align on what they were looking for in terms of action. So we continue to support the work of all of those groups, and for people looking to get involved, we know even if it's not with our group directly, there are many other ones to get involved with. And I think as the list of names continues to grow, I know the death of Muhammad Muhaymin. I hadn't heard about him until after George Floyd, that he was killed with a police chokehold here in Phoenix, and then with Deion Johnson, Carlos Lopez. As that continues to go forward, these protests and for change will continue. And I think now more people are learning about some of the numbers behind the budgets, with the police budget, with the payouts that the taxpayers have to come forward with when misconduct does happen. So I think people will continue to be activated and pushing for change for the next 5 years to 10 years plus. I don't think this is going away anytime soon.
Pastor Stewart, I actually wanted to get your opinion on this as well. We know you've been a pillar of the community for a number of decades, have been integral in leading a number of initiatives, including MLK Day becoming a state recognized holiday. I was wanting to get your perspective on what you perceive the success of the young adults, and if there's any words or ideas that you would like to share about their activity.
Well, as a senior citizen, I am excited what Caitlin's generation is doing and the Generation Z are doing. We are trying to pass the baton to them. And what we want them to do, what we want all of us to do, is take advantage of what we call in theological circles a kairos moment, Kairos. It is when God intervenes our regular schedules because he's trying to get our attention. I strongly believe that George Floyd's public murder by police in Minneapolis can be used of getting our attention. We can either take advantage of this kairos moment, as many are doing around the nation in Phoenix, in the Phoenix Police Department. We can take advantage of it, or we can waste this time, because it will pass. But it is my hope in government, in justice, to come together and see that we have a chronic, perennial problem with systemic racism in the justice system, in our policing, and admit it, acknowledge it, as painful as it may be, and then, to use another biblical word, have repentance. All repentance is to go in another direction. And Chief Jerry Williams has evidenced that and has exemplified that since she came back to Phoenix. And so we have somebody who heads our police department with whom we can work and bring about this repentance, which will bring about change in policing, and hopefully it would move into the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. I wanted to segue over to Chief Williams. We recently learned that you joined the Police Reform and Racial Justice Working Group, consortium of city mayors and police chiefs from around the country to produce, advance, and enact meaningful reforms to address police violence and patterns of racial discrimination. How do you expect to leverage your participation in that group to improve the quality of life for the residents of Phoenix?
That's actually a great question, and it kind of references a little bit of what Caitlin said as well as Pastor Stewart said. So to have the ability to sit on national boards and to give and glean both successes and failures that we've had at the Phoenix Police Department has been definitely beneficial for all of us. To Congressman Stanton's point, as he's talking through the list of things that are on the bill, the Phoenix Police Department banned chokeholds. We were listening. To Pastor Stewart's point, to the nation's point, we are now being forced as a result of a kairos moment to listen, and that's not bad. That's a good thing. That's a way for us to talk through this very painful process of changing and adjusting law enforcement. It's just going to take some time. And my biggest concern right now is that there's not going to be patience for the time that it's going to take to make these changes and adjustments. I did log on and sent a chat to everyone that says, to Caitlin's point, involvement is great, but at the end of the day, we need lawmakers, we need policymakers, we need folks like that. And it's going to take some Gen Zers. It's going to take forward-focused folks like Congressman Stanton and others. It's going to take the faith-based community with Pastor Warren Stewart Sr. And to be honest with you, it's going to take the Greater Phoenix Urban League to continue to have these kind of conversations. So someone like me can articulate some of the whys behind things. It doesn't mean that things can't change, but I think some of the whys that things are happening, or some of the limitations that I have as a police chief because of rules, regulations, and laws, I think we still need to talk through that also. So my participation is allowing me to have access to people and information to really take this idea of police reform, that's a national conversation, obviously, and take it nationally and locally. So we're definitely, Congressman, talking about some of the same things on the list that you have, that we're working through that process. We are listening, we're hearing, in all honesty, we don't have a choice but to listen, and we don't have a choice but to change and improve.
Thank you, Chief Williams. And I actually wanted to, you touched upon it, it's a great opportunity to remind the audience that the deadline to register for the local primary is tonight, up until midnight. So if you haven't registered for the primary, be certain to do so. For those who don't know, I am now the immediate past president of the Greater Phoenix Urban League Young Professionals. And I can tell you we have absolutely been intentional on being engaged in the civic space, making sure that our members in the community have registered, that they voted, that they're aware of the topics, and aware of some of the key issues. With that being said, I wanted to segue back over to Caitlin, who has been integral in activating our young professionals on some of these topics. What sort of challenges do you feel like, or what sort of challenges have you experienced in activating our young professionals and getting them aware of the certain topics and getting them to actually take part in the political process?
It's just getting the information out there, and putting the emphasis that local matters, local elections matter. I think I was lucky in attending a lot of events probably almost 3 years ago now, and remembering leading up to our Phoenix mayoral election, the last one, the top 4 primary candidates all had public safety as one of their platforms. And I can guarantee that all of that meant increase the police budget and put more police on the streets, which literally strikes fear into the hearts of minority communities. And now I think public safety, it's not coded language anymore. People are going to be demanding better answers. They're going to be, what does that look like? What do you mean by that? Who are you going to be keeping safe? So I think now with the work that we've been doing, we had over 20 civic engagement in-person and virtual events talking about elections, talking about the census, talking about mass incarceration, push out of Black students in schools. So we've been doing a lot of the education, getting the information out to people. And now for these next elections, we're going to continue that. And I think people are going to have harder questions. Candidates are going to have to get real and save the generic campaign platforms, but really dive into what that means, because we'll be questioning that.
So Jerry, could I respond? This is Chief Williams. Absolutely. So to Caitlin's point, in many of the conversations that I've had nationally and locally, law enforcement aren't the right people to call for certain things that we've been forced to over time respond to. Should you call Phoenix Police Department or a police agency if someone is having a mental health crisis? I would argue that not necessarily. I would argue that it would be a better place and space for us to have those calls come in and us hand that off to someone who is in a better position to manage that. Should police be called in for homeless issues? I would argue, no, we're not the best person to call. So I totally hear what the Gen Zers are saying about the whole police movement and not having police interaction. Trust me when I tell you, police chiefs across the country and in this county are having that same conversation, because we want the right people to respond in order to make sure that we can help and better assist the community. And sometimes that's not calling police.
Thank you, Chief Williams. I had another question for Congressman Stanton. We can't address the topic of racial justice and not talk about voting rights and the actions to do so. I read that since 2013, Arizona has had a continued decline in the number of polling places while the population has grown. There have been a number of suggestions floated in recent years, from voting by mail to making election day a national holiday. What details can you share with us about any updates on what Congress is doing to ensure that every citizen is able to exercise their right to vote?
All right, that's a great question. And Pastor Stewart referenced earlier that there's some partisanship in Washington. We have to do more to get together and compromise. But this is an area, unfortunately, where there has been no compromise, because, and I'm going to get a little bit partisan here, only because it is what it is. In the House of Representatives, which is led by the Democratic Party, we're in the majority. We're trying to pass laws to make it as easy as possible to vote. We're trying to pass laws that that will allow a ballot to be mailed to every registered voter. They don't have to request a ballot, particularly in a pandemic where being able to vote at home as easily as possible can actually be good for your health. It could cost you your life if you go to a polling place and get this horrific virus. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to participate in the election. And on that issue, we can't get any traction at all because for some reason, the other party, which is in charge of the United States Senate, somehow feels that if we increase voter turnout, it's going to be bad for their candidates. The United States Supreme Court a few years ago gutted the Voting Rights Act. The very first bill we passed, the United States Congress, H.R. 1, fully restored the Voting Rights Act. That bill can't even get a hearing in the United States Senate. Bills that are passed in our state legislature in terms of eliminating people from the voter rolls way too easily, or making it harder for people living on Native American communities that may not live near a mailbox, try to make bills that would make it harder for them to be able to give a trusted person their ballot so they can mail it on their behalf so they can participate in this election. There's a lot of things going on in our state legislature that come in the form of voter suppression. The other side, for some reason, is trying to shrink the vote, and our side is trying to increase voter turnout. I don't think care whether you're Republican or Democrat. Can't we at least agree that increasing voter turnout is good for our democracy and good for the future of this country? So you can hear my frustration in my voice. We put in the HEROES Act, which passed the House but hasn't passed the Senate, over $3 billion to give to the secretaries of states around the country so that we can get a ballot in the mail to every single registered voter. We should do that regardless, but particularly in the middle of a pandemic like we're in. Can anyone disagree that that's the right thing to do?
So I would like to offer this recommendation to the Greater Phoenix Urban League, since you said this is a monthly series and this is the inaugural town hall. In one of your town halls, invite people on the other side of the aisle and ask them some of the same questions about voters' rights, about policing, about criminal justice. Provide for them the data that backs up the legitimacy of our grievances, of the existence of systemic racism. I would love to hear what they have to say, why they block all of this legislation that simply tries to give every American citizen the rights that he or she allegedly has based on the Constitution of the United States of America.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart, for that suggestion, and I can assure you, as the Greater Phoenix Urban League is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, we have every intention on inviting everyone from either side of the aisle, independents, Green Party, whoever is willing to join us. We would more than love to have them. And quite frankly, I think no matter what side of the aisle you sit on, this is a great opportunity to connect with the voting population of the Greater Phoenix area, not just Phoenix. Mesa, Tempe, Scottsdale, Glendale, the surrounding area, and now that we're doing this virtually, around the world, and this can help put Arizona on a national map, which would just benefit all residents of the city. So we absolutely have our list of individuals we are looking to call in to participate. But thank you for that suggestion. Again, I wanted to send another reminder to everybody in the audience. You can, in just about a few moments, start dropping your questions into the chat, and we'll begin coming to each of you with the audience questions. I have another question for anybody that would like to respond to it. It's just more trying to touch upon some specific items that you are looking to see in the, from our local elected representatives. So with the pending general election looming, what message would you offer to voters that are clamoring for change in the way our city, state, and country is governed? What message would you have for our voters that would to speak to them on what they need to do if they are clamoring for change from our elected officials? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I guess I'll jump in because I actually will be on the ballot in November. And I'll be facing to those very voters that you described. First, I want to say, yes, I am a Democrat, but I'm actually going to say something nice about the other party right now on the issue of what action is going to be taken as a result of the tragic murder of George Floyd and the tragic murder of Breonna Taylor and the tragic murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And by the way, the two of those three were captured on video, which has really forced America to look in the mirror and say, how can we improve as a country? And the demand for improvement is coming from all facets of America, across all socioeconomic backgrounds, race, religion, and both political parties. It's the reason why the Republicans didn't initially say no to any type of change. They actually came up with a bill because they realized that Americans are demanding some level of change. I disagree with how far they were willing to go. I think the George Floyd bill goes much further and is the right thing to do. But at least there's an acknowledgement that there's a challenge and they didn't just reject it offhand. Obviously, the other issue, and I don't want to get too far afield from our core issue here of increasing transparency and accountability in policing. But, I just think there's been a complete failure of leadership at the federal and state level on the issue of fighting this horrific virus. And inaction and unwillingness to take decisive action when it mattered is costing thousands and thousands of lives unnecessarily. And people sometimes got caught up in politics in that because they didn't want to take on their members of their base. They didn't want to put on a face mask to protect themselves and protect others. And, the message really is, in a time like this, you've got to take swift and decisive action to protect the people that you represent. And inaction can cost lives. And that's both on police accountability as well as this horrific virus that we're dealing with.
Does anyone else want to jump in on that before I start taking some questions from the audience? If not, we have a great question from Daniel. Forgive me, Daniel, but Mullah Zagnov. Forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but made my best effort. To Representative Stanton, can you pass an automatic vote by mail or voter registration bill in Congress? Is that something that is possible?
All right, that's from Daniel M. We'll call him for purposes of this event. Daniel, not only can we did. I mentioned earlier HR 1, the bill that did vote to fully restore the Voting Rights Act to protect the voting rights of minority citizens, the United States of America, which is so important here in Arizona with our active African-American community and Latino community and Native American community, all who have been hurt but when the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. It's incredibly important. But in addition, that bill did include a passage of automatic voter registration and to make it as easy as possible for people to participate in our elections. Of course, who can disagree that automatic voter registration is the right thing for America? Anytime you have contact with a government agency, you apply for any benefit or service, you should automatically be signed up to vote to make it as easy as possible. And then once you signed up to vote, you should have a ballot mailed to you. You shouldn't have to take an additional step to request a ballot. If you're on the voting rolls, you should automatically be mailed a ballot. And that's what would be included in HR 1, which did pass the House and is awaiting action in the United States Senate.
So it sounds like there's a couple of measures that are waiting in the Senate that we just needed them to take action and or find some compromise on.
Jerry, I don't want to get too far afield, but there are 400 bills that have been passed by the House that are awaiting even a first hearing in the United States Senate. Obviously, part of it is partisanship, but part of it is, they think they have a different political philosophy about what should be done. The House is taking action. I'm proud of the actions that we've taken, and we're going to need to make sure we want to get 400 bills that are very positive, at least get a hearing in the United States Senate.
I have a question from another past president of the Urban League Young Professionals, and it's for Chief Williams. Just wanted to talk about the policy that exists. Oftentimes we see incidents where police officers do not have their body cameras activated. What is the policy for Phoenix PD, and what challenges do you face as a department related to body cameras?
So Sasha S., thank you for that question. With the rollout of the body-worn camera system, policy says that if it is not activated, you will automatically receive discipline. And then that discipline progresses from a copy of a written reprimand, depending on the scenario and situation. So we do have a policy that says that people are supposed to activate them, but instead of leading with the policy, we're always messaging to our employees that when you respond to a call, you need to have that body worn camera activated. And further down the road, we're looking at auto activation also, so there won't even be a need for the officer to turn their cameras on. So that's always a great question, with the caveat too that sometimes a body worn camera video doesn't show everything, but it really does increase what is seen by the officer and what is seen by the community member. So thank you for that question, Sasha S.
Let me just jump in on that one too, Jerry. Mandated use of body cameras, meaning they have to have body cameras and have to be used. They cannot be turned off. That is included in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Bill. It would become a federal requirement that local law enforcement have body cams and the officers are required to use them.
So Congressman, thank you for mentioning that, because what I think sometimes gets lost, and I'm sorry, Jerry, I just jumped in, seems to get lost, is that there are 18,000 police departments across the country, and most of them are not major cities that have 4,000 or so folks and 1 million plus people who live in their city. So for us to say that officers need body worn camera footage and video and have that equipment, I think is going to be critical in helping to show what we're doing and then better assist us in building trust and accountability and transparency. So thank you for that, sir.
Let me jump in real quick again, just to say that Chief Williams and I, when she first became chief, that was the first thing she and I worked on, was getting in the budget enough money so that every single police officer that's on the beat would have that body cam. And she can't say it, but I'm about to say something. It's unacceptable that Arizona DPS does not have body cams on DPS officers. And that's one of the reasons why there are so many unanswered questions about the tragic death of Deon Johnson, is because there was no body cam, because DPS does not have body cams. In 2020, that's not acceptable. I can say that, Chief Williams can't, but it's really important that an agency of that size and importance gets body cams.
Thank you, Congressman Stanton. We have another question from Lisa Bishop. How can interested Phoenix citizens get involved in the Civilian Review Board?
So Lisa B. Bishop, yes. So thank you for that question. Right now, the city of Phoenix is building what that Civilian Review Board and the Office of Accountability is going to look like with an ordinance and rules and regulations for that. I would suggest that if you're interested, to reach out to your elected official, your city council person in your district, shoot them an email and let them know that you're interested in serving and being involved. And I think Pastor Stewart mentioned this earlier. So this isn't a volunteer piece. This is a fully funded Office of Accountability and Transparency in the Civilian Review Board.
Thank you, Chief Williams. We got another question from Eddie Casper. What can the community do to encourage more young people of color to become police officers and attorneys, so those who work in the justice system better reflect the demographics of the population?
Okay, so Ed C, I guess I'll take that one. It's definitely getting young people involved earlier in the process. We have a cadet program, and primarily, to be honest with you, I don't recall ever seeing an African-American in that group of individuals. We do have people of color in there, but encouraging young folks to get started early in this process, having role models out there, not necessarily me, but I have officers who are people of color who are serving as mentors too, to help. And I'm glad you actually mentioned the attorneys. I would like to take that a step further and make that our policymakers, our council people. As Pastor Stewart mentioned, we're passing the baton and we're going to need those Gen Zers in the process. So thank you for that question.
This is another question that appears to be for Chief Williams, but I think anyone can feel free to chime in. And what's your vision for hiring and selecting future officers? To what extent do you think the Civilian Review Board, aka the community, will play a role in said selection and final certification process?
So that's a great question. Let me start with the back end of the question first. The final certification process isn't up to Jerry Williams. The final certification process is up to the system called Arizona Post, and that's the entity and the organization that certifies all law enforcement professionals and all law enforcement people in the state. So if you want to become or get involved in the process of the certification, then that's something you would have to go through the state. As far as getting community members involved in the selection process, our current hiring practice doesn't have enough community members to sit through either oral board processes or questions. So it would be nice to have more interested people who want to be on those panels to help us pick the best person you want to have policing in your community.
Let me respond to the first part of what Chief Williams said, and I guess it's a question. Now, I believe the agency she mentioned, I was in a discussion with someone about that last week. Is this the one where most of the people on the board are white and middle-aged? There's hardly no diversity on that board that deals with policy.
Yes.
Policies for all police departments.
Yes.
So Pastor Stewart, thank you for that. You all are definitely understanding the dynamic. So primarily middle-aged white males are on that state board. It would be nice to have other folks of color on the board, and they do play a role in, again, certifications, whether or not somebody maintains their certification after being terminated or having an investigation happen. So getting more diversity on that board would be good.
Who appoints that board?
Oh, I believe it's the state. I believe it's the governor's office, and it could be through DPS.
All right. Well, we still got a few more questions coming in from the chat. Chief Williams, you seem to be very popular. We'll ask another one from Karanta Gidry, another young professional, and it's do police officers have periodic psychological exams to see if they develop subconscious biases that impact their student?
So that's a great question. Let me answer Carranza. I don't want to mispronounce your name.
Yes.
So we do not have periodic psychological exams. That was something that has been overwhelmingly discussed both internally and externally. The fact that just being able to have a mental health check-in with all the trauma that officers see and are exposed to would be critically important. So that's definitely something that we're looking at. At the same time, we're looking at launching our early intervention system in a more advanced stage in the next month or so. And it's my hope that we're able to identify and intervene long before bad behavior happens. And so we're going to begin the process of launching that hopefully in the next 30 to 45 days. But it would be great to have psychological exams and or just someone to talk to. I do recall meeting with a young group of folks who indicated if we could train, so if you have a 2-person unit, if you could train the second person in the unit how to catch clues on mental health of your partner, perhaps we could cut things off before it turns badly. So you talked about the subconscious biases and the impact of their decision making. I think that all leads back to the psychological exams and, quite frankly, what's going on in that person's life. You know, a sergeant, a lieutenant, or bosses or partners should know that if Jerry Williams just doesn't see it, and how can we mitigate that to get the person the help they need and make sure that they don't have contact with members of our community.
Thank you, Chief Williams. And we still have a few more questions coming in from the audience. Jennifer Bronsky Dangramond, forgive me if I mispronounce your name, but I'm trying. What about changing the restoration of rights process to help with voter rights? Can that happen at the federal level?
Okay. The answer is most of that is done at the state level. That the state is the entity that decides who gets to participate in elections, who doesn't get to participate in elections. However, we can condition federal resources to the states, and obviously we work very closely with the states on having policies regarding restoration of voting rights. And I certainly would be supportive of that. If someone has served their time, there's no reason why that person should not be able to participate in elections. And you've seen states like Florida that did try to continue to restrict voting rights of people that, for example, hadn't paid fines, criminal fines of various sorts. The court ruled that was illegal, that person, a person whose only problem right now is that they haven't paid a fine, should not lose their right to participate in the elections. And that's just simply the right thing to do. People have paid their debt to society and they're out in the community they should be able to participate in elections. And again, unfortunately, I think that issue, as viewed by many people on the other side of the aisle, is not a matter of right and wrong. I think they know it's the right thing to do. I think there's concern that somehow if they expand the electorate, that electorate is going to then vote for the other party, not their party. And unfortunately, I think that's what's really motivating the decisions to try to hold back voting rights for ex-offenders.
Yeah. So if I can take the opportunity to pull in either Pastor Stewart or Caitlin again, and just kind of what can we do as a citizen to engage with our elected officials to take up some of these issues that we obviously care about, like restoring Voters' Rights Act and/or pushing the needle on qualified immunity. So, Caitlin or Pastor Stewart, is there anything that you can suggest that we can do as citizens to take up some of this responsibility?
I defer to my young leader.
So we've focused on trying. We are passionate about getting more young professionals on boards, on commissions. We have heard there are challenges though, when you get somebody on a board and then they're on an island themselves and don't have the support that they need to really push things through. That's a big mountain to climb. I think something else that we can do coming into this role, we're elected to 2-year terms, and then somebody else will come in. Me personally will build more of a resource guide for the connections that I've made in legislature and the city council, or know who to email to request the mayor or somebody else to come speak in an event. Put that in one place so the next person coming into this role doesn't have to start from scratch. I mean, a lot of this is relationship based, so where we can connect more people in to have these productive relationships and feel more comfortable with the political process and the different players, I think that will help.
Okay, Pastor Stewart, you would not be able to defer this question. And this is from one of my favorite people in the world, you, the Dean, Dr. Dean. How can the spiritual community support the mental health and welfare of children as they return to school?
Yes, very excellent question, Dr. Dean. We, first of all, must pray for our children, and we must understand that they are moving into this fall school system like they've never moved in before. I just heard recently that 30% of students have no access to internet. I've been talking to our clergy members and community leaders. Somehow we need to partner with business and reduce that to 0%. And for me, that is a spiritual thing, because God created us mind, body, soul, and spirit. So the very fact there is inequity in many students who are poor or students of color who will not be equipped to study this coming semester in a different way than we've ever expected students to study before. So faith without works is dead. So the African American Christian Clergy Coalition has an education sector. And so that sector's focus is to address needs of our public education and how we can bring equity to it. So thank you very much, Dr. Dean. We will be on that. And children just need to be reassured every day by their parents or guardians when they either begin studying at home via internet or sent off to school, that they are loved, that they have the potential to be the next president of the United States, the next governor, the next chief of police, the next pastor, and that you are going to school in order to become the leader that God would have you to become. I hope that answered that question.
Good. I'm just happy you couldn't escape the question. Got a couple more questions for Chief Williams. With regards to de-escalation training or more intensive police training in general, what kind of actions are you taking to educate your officers better on how to handle situations they're dispatched into?
So thank you for that, Natasha M. call. We have regular online training for all of our employees. We had a crisis communication under stress We're training people to de-escalate and how to talk to people and better manage scenarios and situations. So we always have that going on, and how to handle situations they're dispatched to. A great way to try to better handle them is to get a lot of information up on the front end of the call. And a great example of that, as opposed to, and I mentioned it previously, so if I'm repeating myself, just bear with me. So that we've had calls that come into our call center through 911 that we shouldn't respond to, that we're actually able to give them to a mental health professional so that that mental health professional can deal with that individual, as opposed to police coming. We're right at about 400 or so a month. So I would answer that question by saying, make sure we get as much information leading on, making sure we have constant and consistent training as far as de-escalation training and tactics, and working through the process of teaching our employees how to communicate to individuals so that they can de-escalate a situation when necessary.
Thank you, Chief Williams. So we have time for maybe one or two more questions. And forgive me, guys, I'm trying to look through this. All right. Actually, I had a question for Chief Williams that we didn't get around to in part of the proposed or the prepared questions. And, as a mother of two adult sons, you can only imagine that you've had the conversation with your children, as many Black parents have had with theirs, of how to deal and operate with the police, or how to navigate through those difficult situations. What direction would you give a mother raising a teenage son in 2020?
Probably the same information that I gave to our sons. So the information was given not just to my two, but I always had a house full of boys because we were the house that folks stayed at on the basketball team. So that is to make sure. So there are two sides of that equation, Jerry. First and foremost is if your kid is driving, so let's just talk about the driving piece. If they have a driver's license, proof of insurance, and registration, that's not a Jerry Williams rule, that's a state rule. So have that paperwork online. And then at the same time, in having conversations with law enforcement, we and I don't want this to come off wrong, but how we cross communicate during that traffic stop is critically important. And so we wanted our children to be factual and to be respectful. And at the same time, if something did go wrong, we wanted to empower them to ask for the officer's name and serial number so that a complaint could be filed later, or a commendation could be filed also. So I would have the similar and same conversation. So we're talking now in 2020. Obviously, everyone has cell phone video. So if they're trying to take cell phone video of what's happening in the stop, we're accustomed to that and used to that. But at the same time, that officer is supposed to have body-worn camera footage also, because it's a stop. So it would be the same conversation. And to be honest with you, Jerry, had I had daughters, I would have had the same conversation. Had I had, a kid of a different ethnicity, then I would still have the same conversations too.
Thank you, Chief Williams, for sharing that information. We have just a few more moments before we have to wrap up. Just wanted to extend the invitation to each of our panelists to share some final words if they would like, and we'll start with Congressman Greg Stanton.
All right. I learned a new term tonight, a Kairos moment. Was that it, Pastor?
That's it. That's it.
You taught me something. I'm going to steal that term from you. That's great. I love it.
Yes,
Jerry, thanks again to you and the young professionals at the Urban League. I know that the group is just becoming so much more active in the community and really making our city a better place to live. So I appreciate you and the Urban League for putting this together. I mentioned earlier, this is an inflection point for our country. And I think, sadly, videos and cell phones have forced people to look in the mirror and say, can we do better? And I'm proud of the way that the United States House of Representatives has reacted to this. And we've got a bill that is waiting action in the Senate that would make a significant positive difference with police accountability and police transparency. And then one point I want to make is this. Some people try to make this false choice between you either support reform or you support the police. And I know everyone on this panel rejects that false choice. If you support police, you want positive reform, because positive reform makes citizens safer and it makes police officers safer as well. Great organizations embrace the right kind of reform. And we need to reforms not just in policing, but in so many other aspects of our society as well. And that's why I could proudly say, I support the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It's a strong step in the right direction. And I do it because I support community and I support police and police officers as well. And I hope and pray that people watching this and people across the country are going to say, it is time to pass a bill of this importance and ask our senators to take the right step and pass a similar bill.
Thank you so much, Congressman Stan. We'll move over to Pastor Stewart. Some closing thoughts.
Yes, it is important that we not only engage our elected officials and have our community grassroots organizations, but the Greater Phoenix Urban League has a history of working with business leaders, those corporate executives that really run various aspects of our lives other than policing, other than criminal justice. When we fought the King Holiday 25, 30 years ago, we finally won overwhelmingly when the then Phoenix 40, which is now the Greater Phoenix Leadership, when they partnered with us to fight for the common goal. What I have been doing a lot behind the scenes and others, meeting with executives from the the Greater Phoenix Leadership, from the Greater Phoenix Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We must get business on the side of justice. Business must see their role in helping to solve this criminal justice problem due to systemic racism. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Pastor Stewart. Segue over to Civic Engagement Chair of the Greater Phoenix Urban League Young Professionals, Caitlin Harris-Lang.
Yeah, I just encourage anybody who maybe you haven't thought about it before, but you're thinking about it now, is seeing yourself as someone who would like to review some of these policies, to sit on the panel, as Chief Williams is talking about, for new officers, somebody who'd like to work in Representative Stan's office or run for something yourself. Like, this is the Young Professional Group. We can help be your launch pad. We can connect you to people who can further your journey along. I think this is something that's personal for me, as I relocated to Arizona to see my dad, who retired in Sedona. And as a 60-year-old man at the time, he was pulled over 6 times in a month by police in Sedona, driving home from work. He worked second shift, all for a variety of suspicious vehicle, didn't think he was going to stop at a stop sign. Never cited for anything until he talked to his more wealthy white friends about it, and they spoke to the police chief, and it stopped there. But I have a personal mission. I don't want anybody else's dad or kids or any other Phoenician or Arizonan or a person in the United States to really have that harassing behavior or go through some of those things. So I look forward to continuing to use the Young Professional platform and look forward to more change that we're going to push through.
Thank you, Caitlin. And Chief Williams, closing thoughts.
So the travesty of George Floyd and others continues to play in the minds of the American public, and law enforcement is on the hook for that as a law enforcement professional. At the same time, there are leaders across this country who are leading agencies and organizations who are welcoming and embracing the challenge to change. And we can only do this working with our community members, having our community members ask the hard questions and force us into the process of really drilling down, looking at our policies, procedures, and practices. At the end of the day, change is never easy. It's rough, it hurts, it's tough to have those challenging conversations, but we are here, we're listening, not just as a police department, but as a city and as a country. And as challenging as it is to be a police leader right at this moment in time, I'm a person of faith. I do believe that I'm placed in this position for such a time as this. So people ask.
Thank you, Chief Williams. And I'm going to segue over to Vice Chair of the Greater Phoenix Urban League and the host of tonight, Sherry McFadden.
Thank you so much. We knew this was going to be an outstanding town hall. We're so pleased to have the guests we had tonight. I want to thank all of you all for spending time with us this evening. Also, on behalf of our board chair, Ms. Jessica Raymond, the COO of the Greater Phoenix Urban League, Natalie Alvarez, and of course, our CEO and president, Mr. George Dean. Thank you, board members who were able to join as well. And thank you, State Farm, for sponsoring this first town hall, and for the over 7,000 employees in the Greater Phoenix metropolitan area, as well as our State Farm agents. We look forward to continuing to be a part of this community, and we are invested because we know there's a lot of good work to do, and there's great people that we will make certain we help along the way. Thank you again. Jerry, I turn it back over to you for your outstanding work tonight and navigating through this town hall.
Thank you, Terry. You flattered me so. Just want to get, again, some final thoughts. Maybe let's call it housekeeping. This is a monthly town hall series. The next one will be taking place, and we plan it to take place the first Monday of every month. The next one is taking place August 3rd, and we have Mayor Kate Gallego of the City of Phoenix, along with Representative Ruben Gallego, who will both be joining us for our next town hall. We'll be talking about the COVID-19 response and resources available to our community members, as well as the upcoming elections that we all will be taking on in the next couple of months. So finally, thanks again to our sponsor, State Farm, our host, Sherry McFadden, President George Dean, each of our panelists, Chief Williams, Representative Stanton, Pastor Stewart, and Caitlin Harris-Ling for joining us today. And most important, thank you to our viewers for joining us today, providing us with your insightful questions and remaining engaged in our local civics. We put this on for your benefit, and your participating in this rewards us. So. With that being said, we'll look forward to seeing you all next week. If you haven't already, you can visit the Greater Phoenix Urban League at gphxul.org or gphxul across social media platforms. If you are a young professional between the ages of 21 to 40, I encourage you to engage with our Young Professionals Auxiliary Organization, focused on economic empowerment, civic engagement, professional development. Our young professionals are one of the more driving forces to advancing our organization. You can find them across social media platform at Phoenix ULYP and on the internet, phoenixulyp.com. And we look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you all.
Mask up.
Mask up, as Representative said. Thank you all and good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you very
Good
much.
night.
God bless you.